Imagine walking into a luxury boutique. You see a handbag. It has leather, a handle, a flap, some metal hardware, a few pockets, and a price tag that can make you stop breathing. Thousands of dollars, sometimes tens of thousands, and in the world of rare Hermès pieces, the price can climb dramatically higher. Now compare that with a car. A car can take you across a country. It has an engine, thousands of components, computers, sensors, airbags, climate control, and an entire mechanical system designed to move you from one place to another. An Hermès bag carries your phone, your wallet, maybe your keys. So why can a handbag command a price that rivals or exceeds the price of a car? Is it the leather? Is it the craftsmanship? Is it the rarity? Is it the brand? Or is something much more interesting happening? Because Hermès is not really selling a handbag, at least not anymore. The company began in 1837 as a Paris workshop making harnesses for horses. That sounds almost impossibly far away from the world of luxury handbags. But that origin explains almost everything about Hermès. Because before Hermès became associated with Birkin bags and silk scarves, it was obsessed with one thing: craftsmanship. Thierry Hermès created harnesses designed to be both refined and extremely durable. His work was recognized at the 1867 Universal Exhibition in Paris. In 1880, his son, Charles-Émile, moved the workshops to 24 Rue du Faubourg Saint-Honoré, an address that would eventually become one of the most famous locations in luxury. The company wasn't originally trying to make status symbols. It was making equipment that had to work. And that distinction became the DNA of the brand. Because when your first customers are trusting you with a horse, failure isn't fashionable, it's dangerous. And that mentality would eventually become the foundation of Hermès leather goods. For more than a century, Hermès evolved alongside its customers. As transportation changed, lifestyles changed. Horses became less central to everyday life. Travel became more modern. People needed different objects. So Hermès began applying its craftsmanship to new categories. Around 1900, the house created the haute courroie bag, designed to carry riding equipment. In 1922 came a two-handled bag. In 1937, Hermès introduced its first silk scarf. And in 1938, the famous chaîne d'encre bracelet appeared. This is an important part of the Hermès story. The company didn't abandon its original identity. It translated it. The techniques used to make saddles could influence handbags. The hardware used in equestrian equipment could become jewelry. The visual language of horses and harnesses could become symbols of fashion. Hermès wasn't trying to become a completely different company. It was taking the knowledge it already possessed and finding new places to use it. Then came one of the most important transformations in the history of the house. In 1956, a bag originally created in 1930 was renamed the Kelly, after Grace Kelly. Suddenly, the bag wasn't simply associated with craftsmanship. It was associated with a person, a princess, a global cultural figure, and that changed the meaning of the product. The bag became something more than a container. It became an icon. But Hermès still hadn't created its most famous handbag. That would happen in an airplane. In 1984, something happened on a flight from Paris to London. British actress and singer Jane Birkin happened to be sitting next to Jean-Louis Dumas, who was then the chairman of Hermès. Birkin reportedly complained that she couldn't find a bag suitable for her needs as a young mother. Dumas listened. Then he began sketching. The result was a spacious, rectangular bag with a flap, saddle stitching, and room for the things Birkin needed, including baby bottles. That bag became the Birkin. It's a great luxury story because it begins with something completely ordinary. A woman needed a better bag. Not a status symbol, not an investment, not a collector's item, just a better bag. And Hermès turned that practical problem into one of the most recognizable luxury objects on Earth. But the Birkin's design is actually quite restrained. There's no enormous logo, no giant metallic emblem, no complicated decoration. Its power comes from proportion, construction, materials, and recognition. You don't need the word Hermès written across the front. People who know the design already understand what they're looking at. And that is one of the highest forms of luxury branding. When the product becomes recognizable without the logo, the product itself has become the logo. Now let's open the bag. Not literally. Let's look at how one is made. Hermès says its bags are handcrafted in France. The company describes leather workers assembling around 40 leather pieces in a Kelly bag, using techniques including the traditional saddle stitch. The saddle stitch is particularly important. It isn't simply a decorative line. Two ends of the same thread are worked through the leather, creating a construction technique deeply connected to Hermès' saddlery heritage. And here's the fascinating part. Hermès explicitly emphasizes that no machine can replace the long hours required to master this technique. That changes the economics. Imagine producing a bag using a fully automated factory. The machine doesn't get tired. It doesn't need years of training. It can repeat the same movement thousands of times. But Hermès deliberately preserves techniques that depend on human skill. That means production is constrained by something machines can't instantly multiply: trained hands. And that creates scarcity. If you want to increase production dramatically, you can't simply press a button. You have to train more artisans, and training takes time. Hermès says it has been opening leather goods workshops at an average rate of about one per year since 2010, with each site recruiting roughly 250 to 280 artisans. This is a completely different philosophy from mass production. The goal isn't, how many bags can we manufacture today? It's closer to, how many bags can we manufacture without destroying the craftsmanship that makes them special? And that distinction is crucial. People often assume the price of an Hermès bag comes primarily from the leather. And yes, the leather matters enormously. Hermès emphasizes the selection of materials and describes certain heritage leathers as rare, carefully chosen, and designed to develop character over time. But leather alone cannot explain the price, because leather is still leather. The value comes from what happens to it. Imagine taking a beautiful piece of leather. You can cut it cheaply. You can stitch it quickly. Or you can transform it through a process where every stage is carefully controlled. Cutting, shaping, edge finishing, stitching, hardware, polishing, inspection, and final quality control. The material becomes only one part of the equation. The rest is human knowledge. This is why Hermès calls itself a contemporary artisan house. Its current model spans 16 métiers, from leather goods and saddlery to silk, jewelry, watches, perfumes, ready-to-wear, and other crafts. The company says it maintains most of its production in France across 63 production and training sites and has more than 26,000 employees worldwide. That is a fascinating contradiction. Hermès is enormous, but its products are still built around craftsmanship. It has global reach, but maintains strong control over production. It operates as a major international luxury business, while presenting itself as a house of artisans, and that combination is one of the reasons Hermès is so difficult to copy. A competitor can copy the shape of a handbag, but copying the entire ecosystem behind it is another matter. Now we reach the most controversial part. Why are Hermès bags so difficult to get? Walk into a normal store and ask for a Birkin. You might expect the answer to be, of course, which color would you like? Luxury doesn't always work that way. Hermès itself says Birkin and Kelly bags are sold exclusively through physical stores, and availability can vary because of the level of demand. The company also explains that its products are handmade and that months may be required to create a leather goods object. This creates a powerful psychological effect. When something is always available, we tend to treat it as a product. When something is difficult to obtain, we start treating it as an achievement. And that changes behavior. Scarcity creates desire. But Hermès does something even more sophisticated. It doesn't simply create scarcity by saying we don't have enough. It connects scarcity to craftsmanship. The message becomes, these things take time to make. That's a very different story, because now waiting isn't necessarily a flaw. Waiting becomes part of the value. And this is where luxury economics becomes fascinating. In ordinary business, companies generally want to increase supply when demand rises. In luxury, increasing supply too aggressively can destroy the very scarcity that makes the product desirable. So the company has to balance two opposing forces, growth and exclusivity. Hermès has managed to grow enormously without abandoning that tension. Here's something people sometimes forget. Hermès is not just the Birkin company. In 2025, Hermès generated approximately €16 billion in revenue, with recurring operating income of about €6.6 billion, representing a remarkable 41% of sales. Its workforce reached roughly 26,500 people, and the latest numbers show the business is still expanding. For the first half of 2026, Hermès reported revenue of approximately €8.16 billion, up 6.1% at constant exchange rates compared with the same period a year earlier. Recurring operating profitability remained at 41%. That tells us something important. The Birkin isn't simply a handbag, it's the most visible expression of a much larger business model. Hermès has built an ecosystem around craftsmanship: silk scarves, jewelry, watches, shoes, perfume, ready-to-wear home objects, leather goods, and more. But the same philosophy keeps appearing. Materials matter, design matters, craftsmanship matters, and above all, time matters. That consistency is incredibly valuable, because consumers don't have to wonder what Hermès stands for. The message has been remarkably stable for generations. Now, let's return to the original question. Why can an Hermès bag cost more than a car? The obvious answer is because it is expensive to make. But that's not enough. The real answer is a combination of several things. You're paying for the leather, you're paying for the hardware, you're paying for the artisan. You're paying for years of training. You're paying for quality control. You're paying for French manufacturing. You're paying for design. You're paying for research. You're paying for stores and service. You're paying for the history of the house. You're paying for scarcity. You're paying for the name. And ultimately, you're paying for desirability. But here's the fascinating part. The value of a Birkin isn't determined only by how useful it is. If utility were the main factor, there would be no reason to spend tens of thousands of dollars on one. You could buy a perfectly functional bag for a tiny fraction of that price. The Birkin exists in another category. It is a functional object that has become a cultural object, and that transformation is the real luxury business. Think about what happens when someone recognizes a Birkin. They don't need to touch it. They don't need to inspect the leather. They don't need to know its exact model. The shape alone can communicate something. This is Hermès. And that recognition has been built over generations. It comes from the history of the house, from the Kelly, from the Birkin, from equestrian heritage, from craftsmanship, from controlled distribution, from celebrities, from collectors, from the stories surrounding rare pieces, and from the fact that the brand has never completely surrendered itself to mass accessibility. There is another reason Hermès bags are fascinating. They can age. Leather can develop a patina. Hardware can change. The bag can acquire marks. And instead of necessarily destroying its identity, those changes can become part of the object's history. The bag can become associated with a particular person, a particular journey, a particular period of life. That is very different from many modern consumer products. A smartphone gets replaced, a fast fashion handbag gets discarded, a luxury object can become an heirloom. And suddenly, the original price isn't the whole story. The object has a potential life far beyond the moment it was purchased. So what is Hermès actually selling? Leather? Yes. Craftsmanship? Absolutely. But the deeper product is something much harder to manufacture. Continuity. Hermès began in 1837. 6 generations of artisans have contributed to the house's evolution. Its identity still traces back to the workshop of Thierry Hermès. Its famous address still connects the modern company to its history. Its craftsmanship still draws from saddlery. Its bags still use techniques connected to that original world. And the company continues to invest in training and manufacturing in France. That creates something extremely rare in modern business. A sense that the past is still physically present. When you hold an Hermès bag, you're holding an object created in the modern world. But you're also holding a philosophy that began almost 2 centuries ago. And perhaps that's why Hermès doesn't need enormous logos. It doesn't need to cover its products in branding. The history is already inside the design. There is an irony at the heart of Hermès. The company became one of the world's most recognizable luxury brands by refusing to behave like a conventional luxury company. It doesn't simply chase speed, it emphasizes craftsmanship. It doesn't make scarcity disappear, it preserves it. It doesn't treat its heritage as something locked in a museum. It continues using it. And it doesn't simply sell products. It creates objects designed to remain meaningful long after they leave the store. That may be the greatest secret behind the Birkin. The bag isn't expensive simply because it contains expensive materials. It's expensive because almost every layer of its existence has been turned into part of the story. The material, the artisan, the technique, the weighting, the scarcity, the design, the history, the recognition, and the possibility that one day the bag could belong to someone else. A car loses value the moment it leaves the dealership. A Birkin can enter another world entirely. It can become a collector's object, a family object, a cultural symbol, a piece of fashion history. And in rare cases, an asset whose value is discussed almost like fine art. That doesn't mean every Hermès bag is automatically a good investment. It doesn't mean every expensive bag will appreciate. And it certainly doesn't mean the price is justified purely by the materials. Luxury doesn't work that way. The price is created by a combination of economics and psychology. The question isn't simply, what is this bag worth? The question is, what is this bag worth to someone who wants it? And that is where Hermès becomes incredibly powerful. So, why can an Hermès bag cost more than a car? Because you're not really comparing a handbag with a car. You're comparing two completely different ideas of value. The car is primarily a machine. The Hermès bag is a machine of another kind, a machine for carrying history, a machine for signaling identity, a machine for transforming craftsmanship into desire. And after almost 2 centuries, Hermès has become extraordinarily good at operating that machine, from a small Parisian harness workshop to the Birkin, to a global luxury empire generating more than 16 billion a year. The fundamental idea has remained surprisingly consistent. Make fewer things, make them exceptionally well, make them last, and make people care about them. That's the secret. Not the leather, not the gold, not the logo. The value is in the story, and the longer that story survives, the more powerful the object becomes. This is Hermès, and this is why a handbag can sometimes cost more than a car. Toi kun kote taumut hi video Hermès, taumut hinan minghua chofan modo video Hermès.